Good morning, Dan and Amy. So Donald Trump's going to give a speech on Monday about how to defeat ISIS.
Yeah, and now a little bit of breaking news that he now said he was being sarcastic when he said that President Obama was the founder of ISIS.
He and a Hillary Clinton co-founder.
Oh, yeah. Don't
he
forget
gave,
the Hill Dog.
So he's given a speech on ISIS Monday. He gave a speech in Detroit on economic policy this past Monday. Hillary Clinton tried to do the same yesterday and trotted out the liberal tropes, did 180s on positions like opposition to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which just a few years ago she called the gold standard in trade agreements when she was flacking for the Obama regime until she had to kind of reposition herself in the context of this campaign. And the other thing, with all the focus on Trump and his ability to kind of maintain message focus, Hillary's got a problem maintaining message focus, too. It's a little bit beyond her control. It's not that she's not automaton-ish when it comes to her offerings on the trail, because she is, but it's her conduct that is haunting her. And Jake Tapper had a good piece on CNN yesterday that ran interference into her speech in Detroit on her tired economic policy, government-centric view of the economy. Jake Tapper talking about Clinton emails, these recent Clinton Foundation-related emails that were unearthed thanks to the Shadow Department of Justice Judicial Watch.
In some ways, it's the very mixing of all these different groups of people, foundation and campaign and the State Department and such, that on its face will obviously create so many potential conflicts of interest, no?
Well, yeah. Oh, yes. Walking conflict of interest. Drew Griffin followed up doing the reporting on those emails.
That is exactly the point. These emails being released now today show what we've seen over and over again. And it is exactly, Jake, that intermingling of interests and donations and favors being done between the Hillary Clinton State Department, the Clinton Family Foundation, and the donors, who apparently have very easy access to both when they need help.
Hi-yo. And so the question is, who has got the more difficult challenge? Trump getting out from underneath his rhetoric, or Hillary getting out from underneath her behavior? We put that question to our friend Fred Barnes, the executive editor at the Weekly Standard, weeklystandard.com, who joins us now. Thanks, Fred. Appreciate you joining us again.
Yeah, I think Trump has the bigger problem just because the press is so hostile to him. Stories like these emails come along that the press can't avoid. They can make them one-day stories, but House Republicans put out a report they put out a report on a separate story about how the intelligence about ISIS had been doctored, but the emails came out thanks to Judicial Watch, were released. In other words, when you stick these stories in front of the mainstream media, they have to report them, but their main focus is still their hostility to hurt Donald Trump in any way they can.
Well, it's easier to report on Donald Trump because with Hillary Clinton in the emails, they actually have to read emails and investigate.
Yes.
And that takes time.
Yeah, that is onerous.
No, don't you believe there's any truth to that, Fred Barnes?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand.
Oh, he's not listening to me.
No,
that's okay. No, I'm just saying that it's easier to do Donald Trump because you don't have to think too much. You let Donald Trump, he digs his own holes by saying President Obama is the founder of ISIS. Come on. But then with the Hillary emails, they actually have to go through 269 pages of emails, and that takes time.
Very good point. I agree with you. It is easier. And besides, Trump, and then the press can pretend like that Trump really meant that there was a founding document and a founding meeting, and Trump was saying that Obama was there. But everybody knows. I mean, everybody in the media knows what he was actually saying was that because of his and Hillary's weak stand against ISIS, that allowed them to really prosper as they have in the Middle East and elsewhere.
Well, right, of course, but they're going to take him literally when it is against his interest to be taken literally, and then put him in context when it's against his interest to be put in context, kind of to your opening point. And
exactly.
And Amy's right too. Yeah, I mean the fact of making journalists do work. Well, that's just a bridge too far. I want to go back to what you mentioned though too. This survey of intelligence analysts and their managers conducted by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence finds 40% of the analysts surveyed who are working for U.S. Military Central Command, whose area of responsibility includes Syria and Iraq, said, quote, they had experienced an attempt to distort or suppress intelligence in the past year. I mean, after all of the left's hyperventilating about Bush lied and people died with respect to WMDs in Iraq, you have 40% of intelligence officers and analysts saying they're pressured by their overseers to cook the books on ISIS and terrorist-related reporting. This seems to me like a major story.
Hey, one-day story for the media. They're too busy pounding Donald Trump to do that. And again, it's only because the House committee put out a report saying that all the information about ISIS had been doctored. Obviously, Dan, for political reasons. I mean, why else would you do it? You would do it so the intelligence would fit with what President Obama was claiming. In other words, that boy, we're really doing well against ISIS. We've really hurt them, and they're not, and they're shrinking, and we're beating them. Which obviously is not the case. But the thing that's most alarming about me to this is it's one thing to get people at the State Department to do this, but this was the military, CENTCOM headquarters that allegedly doctored the intelligence. I mean, when you are corrupting the military, we're in a much worse situation than I thought.
Isn't that a crime?
I'm sorry?
Is that a crime to do what you're alleging?
Well, yes.
Well,
if I understood your question correctly.
Yeah. That's criminal behavior.
I think we need to have Jim Comey step in. Let's just call it extreme carelessness and be done with it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, this idea that anybody would commit a crime. Another story too, Fred. It's I would say underreported and currently certainly underappreciated by the Obama regime. 30 some odd clergy. Conservative cultural leaders signed a letter calling on the media to report on Christian genocide in the Middle East. Listen to these numbers. In Iraq alone, the number of Christians has plunged from 1 million 12 years ago to fewer than 275,000 today. Now, that's not all necessarily people being murdered by terrorists and people moving, to avoid being murdered by terrorists. But we know hundreds of thousands of Christians have been slaughtered by ISIS. And, it takes every fiber in John Kerry's being to just utter the confirmation that there is a genocide occurring and nobody reporting it, really.
I think you're right. Nobody's reporting it, really. And to be honest with you, we've had very little in the Weekly Standard magazine about it, at least not enough that would be commensurate with the genocide that is going on. And it's true that ISIS hasn't murdered all these people, but you murder some and the rest leave.
Right.
Because they fear being murdered. I was in the middle of when was I last in the Middle East? It's been a few years, but you could already see the Christian population shrinking, and you hear about people who had left and people who were thinking of leaving. And, there's really only one reasonably safe place now for Christians in the Middle East, and that's in the Jewish state of Israel.
Now, I wanted to move on to this RNC conspiracy theory. Apparently, 75 top GOP leaders have urged Priebus to shift resources, money away from Trump campaign because they believe it's affecting down ballot candidates. Do you think Donald Trump is affecting Senate and House races?
Well, he can affect them by doing well or by doing poorly. Look, I mean, this is idiotic on the part of these folks that Newt Gingrich refers to as establishment deserters. But anyway, Look, and this is the one problem with the Never Trump movement. Not the one problem, but I think the worst problem. They want people not to vote for Trump. But the truth is, the better Trump does, if he wins or if he comes close, the better he does, the better Republicans will do down ticket. We know that there's been very much less split ticket voting in recent years than used to be the case in the past. So if you're so worried about losing down ticket races, you should hope that Donald Trump does very, very well.
Well, that's right. And I'll tell you, I think there's a little bit of hysteria, and it's contrived hysteria by the Never Trumpers, too, about losing the Senate. You're talking about the Democrats having to win 5 of the 7 Senate seats in that are up and hotly contested: New Hampshire, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, Florida, and Indiana. Number one, I don't think that's going to happen. I think a couple of those senators are going to go, but I don't think it's going to happen in terms of 5 of 7. Number two, just the polling I've seen, because I've done it in Illinois, thinking about what your point, Fred, about split ticket and people making independent decisions down ballot, I haven't seen any drag from Trump to Kirk to state legislative races. Trump is performing in Illinois, of all places, at least as good as the generic ballot. In some places, like south of Chicago, central and southern Illinois, he's performing better than Kirk. He's performing better than the generic ballot. He's performing better than Ronner is right now. So it's a very mixed bag, including in these difficult states like Illinois.
Yeah, no, it is. And you see even in places like Nevada, where Congressman Joe Heck, a Republican, has a pretty good chance, I think he's in the lead in polls, of winning a Harry Reid seat. That would be an addition for Republicans.
Right.
And you see Rob Portman in Ohio running nearly 10 points ahead of his Democratic opponent. Now, look, there's some tough races that Republicans have. Kelly Ayotte in New Hampshire and Toomey in Pennsylvania. But I think at the moment, looking at it, assuming that Trump does not lose in a landslide, and I don't think he will, Republicans have a better than even chance of holding the Senate.
All right. He is Fred Barnes, the executive editor at the Weekly Standard, weeklystandard.com. Fred, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good, Dan. Thanks, Dan. Amy.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.